Contemplation of beauty as a natural religion. Besides the dimension of esoteric Oriental meditative practices, I also had a passion for poetry and literature as well as a habit of daily seeking the contemplation of beauty in nature. When I was 9 years old, I borrowed a book of poetry from the school library and copied different short poems with naturalistic themes into a notebook. By reading them frequently, I soon knew them all by heart. By recalling them while contemplating the hilly surroundings beyond the outskirts of my village, I could intensify my emotions. Such event was sought every day and lived with the sacredness of a religious experience. Instead, the discovery of the pain of which life is pervaded, including not only the animal kingdom but also the vegetable one, produced a rebellion to the concept of God as endless goodness. I was never afraid to express my protest. Noticing how many illusions are propagated by religions and cults, I felt sorry for all those who, in the abyss of their tragedy, were not able to voice their sharp loud cry to God facing Him in protest but kept on imploring God, visualized as an omnipotent, supernatural being, not with a spirit of devotion and surrender, but with such a beseeching attitude as if they feared even worse calamities. As my high school years were drawing to a close, I developed a passion for classical music and Beethoven became my idol. Despite the tragedy of his deafness at his creative peak, he reacted in a most honorable manner and carried on creating works he had already composed in his heart. The Heiligenstadt Testament, where he reveals his critical condition and states his decision with calm and total resolution, made him almost a hero and a saint in my eyes. He wrote to a friend, "I have not a single friend, I must live alone. But while I know that God is nearer to me than to other artists, I associate with Him without fear. I have always recognized and understood Him and have no fear for my music. It can meet no evil fate. Those who understand it must be freed by it from all the miseries which the others drag about with themselves." How could I remain indifferent? He was drawing incomparable music out of the depths of his being and offering it to humanity. The triumph of this frail human creature over a nonsensical fate had a tremendous impact on me. The daily rite of retiring to my room to listen to that music consolidated my consecration to the ideal. Each day for the first 3 months after high school graduation, when I experienced a strong romantic crush whose fulfillment seemed impossible, I listened to Beethoven's Missa Solemnis. The more my emotionalism prompted me to act rashly, which proved to be destructive to my love affair, the more my desperate heart found refuge in that masterpiece during a walk in the country. Sitting on a hill contemplating a far landscape bathed in the warmth of the summer evening, his music rang out again in my memory. What my heart craved was before me, perfect and untarnished neither by fears nor by a sense of guilt. That was my first spiritual experience. Academic studies. I chose to study math at university. While attending the first classes, I understood that a happy chapter of my life was concluded and there would be no time for distractions like enjoying classic literature. All my attention was focused on finding an effective method of study and a way to avoid wasting my energies. This meant focusing in a disciplined way both during study time and during my idle moments. For this purpose, I decided to utilize the dynamic of the previously described exercise to rest the mind. A bad habit I had to conquer was a tendency to daydream and jump from one memory to another to extract moments of pleasure. I had formed the unshakable conviction that when thought becomes an uncontrollable vice, for many it is an utter addiction. It constitutes not only a waste of energy but is a main cause of almost all failures in our life. The frenzied whirl of the thought process, accompanied by alternating moods and strong emotions, creates at times unreasonable fears that hinder the decisive action that life requires. On other occasions, it fosters an optimistic imagination that unfortunately pushes the person toward inappropriate actions. I was convinced that disciplined thought was the most valuable trait I could develop and would open the doors to fruitful achievements. My decision filled me with euphoric enthusiasm. However, after breathing the limpid, sparkling, celestial state of thought restraint for a few hours, I encountered a significant mental resistance. In the mirror of my introspection, I saw how other habits were wasting my mental energy. One of these, wrapped and unexpectedly dignified by the concept of socialization, was that of falling daily into nerve-wracking discussions with friends. It was time to renounce it. I abruptly avoided their company. Certainly mine was not an impossible sacrifice, theirs was not my world. One day during a short afternoon walk, I saw them from afar sitting lazily and chatting in the usual bar. My heart gave a lurch. They were my friends and I loved each of them, yet seeing them together, they appeared to me like chickens cooped up in a narrow space. Mercilessly, I assumed they were completely governed by the instincts of eating, partying, sex, and generally overindulging. Whatever tragedy happened to their friend didn't concern them. They would have kept on sipping the daily pleasure of dawdling until misfortune hit them personally. I found it very sad and distressing. At that moment I again resolved to concentrate on my studies, and passing my exams became my sole focus. I perceived that period of my life as a descent into an unfathomable night, but I knew that in order to shape my future the way I desired, tough sacrifices were necessary. To see the dawn of a day of pure joy, I would have to endure momentarily a dark emptiness. I would savor it without lament and without being tempted to turn on a light for momentary solace. Inspiration from Beethoven and Mahler. The incident put me in a gloomy mood, but a sentence from Beethoven's Heiligenstadt Testament came spontaneously to mind and evoked the bliss I had enjoyed during my high school years. O Providence, grant me at least but one day of pure joy. It has been so long since real joy echoed in my heart. Oh when, O Divine One, shall I find it again in the temple of nature and of men? Never. No, oh that would be too hard. An event illuminated my life. A friend introduced me to Gustav Mahler's Symphony No. 2, Resurrection, and invited me to a live concert of this work. I read the information leaflet. Each part of the symphony had a precise meaning which Mahler himself had explained in a letter to the conductor, Bruno Walter. It was Mahler's intention to treat death as the inevitable end to all human enterprise. The music itself conveyed a sense of desolation which was sweet, as if death meant drifting off into a peaceful sleep. In a sorrowful voice of endless dignity, the words of the contralto communicated a childlike innocent vision. O red rose! Man lies in direst need. Man lies in deepest pain. Oh, how I would rather be in heaven. While listening, I fancied I was in the countryside during a light rain. But it was spring and a ray of sun pierced the clouds. Amid the vegetation there was a beautiful red rose. That simple vision brought solace to my heart's inner ache and warmed me to a high pitch of enthusiasm with the thought that beauty would be with me forever, in all the places of my solitary wanderings. Then the choir sang some verses from Klopstock's hymn. Resurrect, yes resurrect. Will you, my dust? After a brief rest. Immortal life. Immortal life. Will he who called you, give you? Next Mahler's own verses were chanted. These ended with wings I have gained. In love's fierce striving, I shall soar aloft. To the light that has not pierced I will die, so I can live. Resurrect, yes resurrect. Will you, my heart, in an instant? What you have coveted and fought for shall lead you to God. In the following days, I tried to penetrate the meaning by reading everything I could on the symphony and listening to it entranced in the quietude of my own room. After many integral and enthusiastic listening sessions, The words, stubborn word ich. So leben. I will die so I can live, resounded all day long in my mind like a thread around which my thoughts crystallized. Would I ever, now or before infantile old age, be able to die to myself, namely to die to my small self or my ego? Was it possible to cross the foggy curtain of thoughts, superficial emotions, sensations and instinct, and emerge into that pure dimension for which I had yearned many years and which I felt was my highest good? There was no doubt I was willing to perfect my self-imposed discipline to the extreme, but by no means did I want to spend the rest of my life staring at the wall of my silenced mind and waiting for something to happen. I will seize fate by the throat, said Beethoven, so I too was prepared to act in a strong and decisive way.